You know, I watch a lot of TV, but there's one genre I have refused to touch: reality shows.
Honey, you don't grab me, and
go away. You're not my family. I don't want you near me right now.
What's wrong with you guys? My diamond earring came off in the ocean and it's gone. And there's people that are dying.
Yikes. Honestly, you'd sooner catch me drinking decaf than watching any of these series. Over the years, I've definitely avoided water cooler conversations about Survivor, the Kardashians, any of the Real Housewives, and a whole bunch of others I've never heard of. It's my view that they're called trash TV for a reason. But many of my coworkers, almost all of them in fact, disagree. And this week they got some backing from one of our frequent guests. In the Boston Globe, Joanna Weiss explains her reason for tuning in. Teachable moments for her and her 15-year-old daughter. She writes, quote, "We've been watching TV together for most of her life, but there's been nothing quite so educational as this season of The Bachelorette." Joanna's the editor of, look at her, she can't even say it with a straight face, the editor of Experience Magazine at Northeastern University. Good to see you. Jen Deaderick is author of She the People, an illustrated history of women's citizenship. Before I even ask you a question, I want to say I'm a skeptic, not because I'm against watching the unwatchable. I used to watch Cambridge City Council meetings, so I know
what's
unwatchable.
worse?
Exactly. But can you briefly make your case in addition to that sentence?
Yes, I will say that you, by not watching any reality TV, are missing out on the allegory of our times. This is, and look, you have to pick and choose because there's so much of it.
You're already defensive, by the way. You're the one that made the argument, not me.
I'm looking at your eyes.
Okay, make your case.
Let me make the case just for The Bachelorette,
Yes,
because
of course.
it has been, this season in particular, a way to examine and discuss healthy relationships. And every man that every sort of finalist that Hannah, the Bachelorette, if you haven't seen the show, she's got to choose from 20-some men, gets down to 6, 5, 4. They're allegories for the kinds of people. They sort of represent these archetypes of relationships, and there is so much to talk about as you're kind of figuring out who's best for her.
Okay, you're nodding in agreement. Before you tell me why you agree, here's a little bit I watched today of Luke P. and Hannah talking about sex and purity on The Bachelorette. Here it is.
How marriage should be honored by everybody and how the marriage bed should be kept pure. If you told me you're having sex or you had sex with one or multiple of these guys, I'd be wanting to go home. 100%.
So, like, I have had sex.
Say what?
Yeah. And Jesus still loves me.
Okay. Now, so you were nodding in agreement with Joanna about the lessons that it can be taught. You have a kid, too.
I do. I have a 14-year-old.
Right.
And she and I watch. Well, I was going to talk about Project Runway.
Well, go ahead. You can go about that. That I've actually seen, by the way.
Which is great. But I will say, actually, we love watching Love Connection, the new one with Andy Cohen, and because it is, you get to, I mean, she's starting to date my daughter. And so this whole idea of, I mean, it's very hyper, but like, it's still the issues, like, what about that guy? That guy's being kind of a creep. This guy's that guy's nice. It plays out in the sort of big scale. And Project Runway, for me, it's a touchstone for us. It's like a...
Why is that?
Because, well, for one thing, Tim Gunn. And
I love Tim Gunn, by the way. I interviewed Tim Gunn years ago, by the way. It was thrilling,
And Heidi Klum, too. I love...
She was fine, okay.
So I love I love that they talk about being competitive without being nasty to each other, the importance of being able to work with each other and respect each other. I love that Tim Gunn, when he goes on the home visits, he respects the way they live, but he's still himself.
Yeah, speaking of that, by the way, we have the perfect clip for this. This is during one season of Project Runway. Tim Gunn angrily sat the contestants down and criticized one group of designers after a team challenge, stating that a contestant bullied them. So essentially what you're talking about. Here's Tim Gunn.
I fundamentally do not understand your behavior and demeanor and affect on the runway. I don't get it. I don't know why you allowed Gretchen to manipulate, control, and bully you. I don't understand it.
And I agree with half of what he said. I don't understand your behavior watching it or your behavior. But it also, I mean, it sort of sounds, I don't mean to be too heavy about this, but you were pretty serious a minute ago, and so were you. It's almost like an excuse kind of thing. I mean, it's sort of like, it's trash TV, but there's some good lessons. You seem to be saying it's not even trash TV, that there's some moral thing that we get out
Look,
of this?
I'm not an expert on this, but I would bet that there were people when Jane Austen was writing about human relationships in all of her books who said, oh, that's trash, why would you read those silly romances? I mean, these are all shows, and again, some are better than others, but they're all shows about human relationships.
Is there not a bad, I mean, one of the things I read, by the way, I actually watched part of this today with Luke and Hannah, but also they talk about it is rare that there's like a sex-positive discussion without it being irresponsible. Is that part of what
that
the
is?
appeal
I mean,
was?
that's been part of what this season was about. Yeah, and there were people who are, you know, they've got T-shirts based on the things that were talked about in the show. If anyone's been watching, a windmill is now like a big symbol for America.
But you know, she didn't do it with Pete in the windmill twice. She did it 4
4
times. Do you
times.
believe I know
I'm on
this?
top of this,
now
too.
that is an important. So you often hear. Well, you're both often here on politics.
Right.
There's another reality show. You can tell me what the value has been. The Apprentice. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I
Who
did
starred
watch,
on that?
I don't. I'm
What
not
did we
proud
learn?
of that. But
What
I
did we
did.
learn? I mean, you know, by the way, a lot of people think, which may or may not fit in this conversation, that helped create the image,
Well,
that
this-
helped create a candidate that created
Yes.
a president.
I would say that there was an irresponsibility on the part of NBC because if you read, I mean, all editors have to do this, right? You know, there's editors come into shows and make people look coherent. If you read the reports from the editors who worked on that show, they talk about having to make it so that he made sense, having to make it make sense that he fired the people he fired so they'd have to pull it together because it wouldn't. And
Tim Gunn is unedited, and Heidi Klum
no,
is
it's
unedited.
edited, but I think that there's I mean, everything's edited on TV. I mean,
Okay,
I think that's
not
the
this,
thing. Is
but go
also,
ahead.
I think that this isn't.
Okay.
This is live to tape, but I think that also maybe because we're more media savvy, I don't expect that I'm seeing the entire story on Project Runway, and so I just know that they're just. But I mean, movies are also. You don't have movies that are. Like the whole, you know, you don't see like every single hour the footage from, unless you have the director's cut, which is always tedious.
You have to have cultural literacy about these things, and that's another thing you talk about with your kid when you're watching the show. Is like, yeah, that's not real, and probably a producer was whispering in her ear, and yeah, he didn't. You know, you
should
can,
avoid windmills. You tell them that.
don't
Obviously.
go near a windmill.
No, I would understand
Not till
that.
you're 30.
Come on. And
But-
I
But go ahead. No, finish your thought. I'm
go ahead.
sorry.
Oh no! I mean, you need to understand how these things are put together, and you know, it's too old now to say reality TV isn't reality.
So can I, a closing thing, is this a good source of the, I mean, I like a lot of trash television and books and movies too, and is it, it's fun and there's something redeeming in it, or you think this is actually a good source of guidance? And you don't
I think you take guidance from anything
place
that you
that's
watch. I mean, The
offered, okay.
Sopranos has got stuff to complain about too.
I agree with that.
My daughter just started watching Mad Men. There's
She
going to be a
did.
lot of conversations we're going to have about that.
By the way, I spoke to your daughter. She's been drinking martinis for lunch.
Yeah, no, I
for
know.
the
It's
last
been
couple of
terrible, and
days.
all the
So what
smoke
can
and
I
milk,
say?
terrible.
Jen, it's nice to see you.
you, too.
You almost convinced me. Almost, I should say. Joanna, thank you as well.